Hi, welcome to NDE TV. I'm Peggy Robinson. Today's guest is Stephen Poplin. Hi, Steve.
Hello, how you doing, Peggy?
Now, I called you Steve. Do I call you Stephen?
Stephen.
Okay, Stephen.
Mhm.
And would you mind introducing yourself and letting the audience know what you're going to talk about today?
Okay, very good. Yes. So my name is Stephen Poplin, and I have been doing not only past life regressions for something like 40 years, but also the life between life sessions as made famous by Michael Newton. And I've had a couple of mystical experiences starting from age 21, in which I had like an awareness of something greater, but at the same time, a bit of a confusion, like, minding my own business, and suddenly, things are shining and sparkly and things like that. But then that led me to want to, uh, let's say, explore and study the spiritual world. And so I went to college, philosophy degree, looking at various programs, faiths, perspectives, Taoism, Buddhism, etc., to kind of put the pieces of the puzzle together. And then at the same time, I thought, while coming across Hinduism, I said, wow, look at this. We've got this thing called reincarnation, as well as astrology that they talked about. And I go, well, what is that about? And so then I started taking a look at that. And I then slowly got into hypnosis and past lives, not only for me to kind of like take a look and see where I came from, but then wanting to aid others to also find out about their spiritual journeys. Where does the soul go when we're not here on the earth? And do we have lives on other planets? And what about the spirit world? And what happens after death? All of this was really quite fascinating to me. And then I've had, as I said, 40 years worth of experience of using hypnosis to place people into a altered state, into a trance, so that they can find out for themselves, where did they go? What did they learn? How are they as souls having their journeys? And what are their lessons today?
For you and for your patients, I assume they're called, um, how does this appear? Is it flashbacks? Is it bits and pieces slowly fit together? How's that come about?
Yes. Peggy, it can happen in many different ways. My clients oftentimes can, let's say, feel like they're floating and they're getting these vague impressions, sometimes colors, sometimes it's like a black and white picture, over on the left-hand side. Sometimes it's really in Technicolor. I mean, really right there. And a lot of variation in between, from kind of like vague sorts of things where they're picking up maybe more of a physical remembrance. Okay. And it's not so visual, at least at first, but then they feel like they're in a room and there's other people in the room with them. All the way to the other side of someone who changes their personality and starts talking to me in a different voice, and they are that past life personality. And I'm having a conversation with someone who died 400 years ago.
That reminds me of seeing on TV shows years ago. I don't see it anymore come up, but someone have a traumatic injury and all of a sudden they're speaking another language or they talk with an accent. I find that fascinating.
Yes, I've had that several times.
What do they make of that? Is that like they went back into a past life, like they're from this other country, so now they're talking that language? What do you make of that?
Well, I think number one, that is almost like proof of past life or reincarnation. When it's so clear, when it's so vivid, when someone starts speaking another language, or in my case, when their voice changes and their personality changes. And it's like, where does that come from? Except from a very strong personality from another time, another place. So to me, it's more like a validation of the continuity of the soul.
Do you know if there's been any studies about people with multiple personalities that those could be past lives?
Right, right, indeed. Yeah,
Have
I
you ever
agree
heard
with
of that?
that.
It just come to me. I wondered.
And what kind of
Do you
person?
know if there's been any kind of studies to see, people have multiple personalities. Has anybody ever suggested that maybe those personalities are actually past lives coming forward?
You know, uh, it hasn't been like really like multiple personalities, but sometimes, especially if in a past life, someone was not in agreement with how it went, with something that was stopped too early, or if there was a great dissatisfaction with how that life turned out, then after death, that personality really still holds on. And so it can feel like in our present life, like another voice or a different perspective, or, I don't know what I was saying. It just comes in a very strange way. And to me, there can be such a strong leftover issue or desire or frustration, usually emotional, that it sticks with that person. And to me, that needs to be resolved. And there's been many instances where a past life bleed through, that's what I call it, past life bleed through, is really affecting that person today.
Have you seen the movie Yesterday's Children?
I have not.
Jane Seymour. It's supposed to be a true story. And I never believed in reincarnation because I'm a Christian and it tends to go against, what Christians teach. And like they're like, oh, don't believe in that stuff. It's awful. And so, I tend to stay away from it. But I watched that movie years ago and it put that little question in my mind about could that be true? But so I'll just real brief tell you is so she's got a teenage son about to go to college. She's married, they have a business. She ends up late life pregnancy. And during that pregnancy, she starts having these very vivid memories of this other woman who lived in another country in another time. And her mom says, well, looky here, these pictures you drew when you were a child. You talked about this then. So her husband wanted her to just forget about it, but her mom helped her and because she says, well, here, she drew a map. And so she was still having these vivid dreams. So she ended up looking at this map and I know where this is. So they went to this map store and the guy said, here's the actual place that you're calling this town and this street. So her and her teenage son flew there. It was another country. And long story short, she felt she was like reincarnated from this woman who had like 5 kids, like wasn't exactly 100 years prior because her kids are in their 80s, 90s now at that time of the movie. And the mom had been abused by her husband. She died before she had her next child, and the kids all got separated. And she had made her oldest son promise her that he would keep the kids together. She had all this guilt, all these decades. And so, long story short, she brought all the kids together at this woman's grave. So she used a priest in town to help her find this family. And she went back to him and says, what do you think of this? Because she's thinking it's a past life. And he said something like, the Catholic Church doesn't believe in reincarnation, but we believe that possibly like a possession, like this woman's soul has possessed this woman into her memories into her so she would bring her kids together. So I thought, I can understand it on that level too. So, that would make sense. We might assume, oh, that must be reincarnation, but yet it was like, and so when you talk about this, I'm sitting here wondering if some of these maybe aren't, I'm not saying they're not, but if they could be instead of reincarnation, if they could be not possession, but I don't know what else word to use, like where spirits nearby and bringing in their thoughts and their memories into someone else. And when they get in that hypnosis state, maybe they're open. What do you think? It's just
Mhm.
thoughts off the top of my head.
And indeed, and I've come across both types.
Okay.
I have, in fact, sometimes, helping lost souls or entities to get free to leave my particular client, or to leave this house or something like that, and to move on and go back towards the light. That's, almost like a part-time job of mine. I have come across it quite a few times, but I truly make a difference between another soul who, when you think about it, has left a life body and now is free. Why not be able to, from having that to then later on come back into another body as a baby? So one can easily go from, believe in reincarnation that way. But an interesting perspective, from a Christian world, in the New Testament, there are a couple of stories pointing towards reincarnation. And one is that Jesus was asking his followers, his disciples, who do you think I am? And they start mentioning some people from the Old Testament. I think like Ezekiel was one of them. And just by saying that, oh, I think you are Ezekiel, who is already dead, who is already in the past, and they think, oh, you may be that now. That is reincarnation. And then there was that other story, where Jesus helped that blind man to see, and he put a little bit of mixture and spit on his eyes, and then the miracle was that now he could see, this blind man. And so then the disciples again asked Jesus, why do you think that he was blind? Because of what he has done, or was it his parents? And just by asking that question, if he was born blind, but it was because of something he had done, he had to have done it before he was born.
Mm.
So anyway, those are, interesting things, just a couple of examples in the Bible.
I think maybe, I'm guessing, as a Christian and just knowing Christians my whole life, is that maybe we resist the thought of reincarnation because we're taught if you're good, you go to heaven. You're bad, you go to hell. And we don't want someone bad getting another chance to come back. Like, no, you're supposed to go to hell. I mean, we are self-righteous like that as Christians, right? Like, I was a good person, I should go to heaven. They're a bad person, they should go to hell. And so, but the people believe in reincarnation, it seems to me, I could be wrong and generalizing everyone, but it seems like they don't believe in hell or heaven. They believe, oh, you just come back as something else or someone else. And us Christians are like, you got to pay for your sins, like if you don't know Jesus. And so it's very ingrained in us to resist, you know, and
Right, right. You probably know, in the early history of Christianity, that there were believers in reincarnation, recognizing that a merciful God will not punish people forever, but they will have another chance. You can try again and sin no more.
yeah, and I think God can do anything he wants to. If he says, hey, I think you need to redo this, like go back to third grade.
Exactly. Right, right. Yeah. And learn from your mistakes, and think of this as, a loving parents to their children. Learn from your mistakes, and I'm afraid you have to go, you flunked the third grade.
Right. Like maybe you're this horrible person and you burnt somebody's house down with the family in it. Well, maybe now you come back and you get your family burnt in a fire. I don't know.
Exactly.
And I,
Right,
and I
right. I
hate
mean, that is
saying,
classic karma, Peggy.
yeah. And I hate saying that because I feel like, oh, wait, somebody's going to say, well, my whole family's burnt on a fire. You saying I deserved it? You're saying, and I'm not saying that. I'm just throwing out ideas because we don't know. We don't know the mind of God, what he's capable of. But and people have said to me on my show before, why don't you believe in reincarnation? Well, I have this memory because I have a memory that doesn't belong to me. And I was a very poor girl, right? A short, chopped up haircut. And I have this memory of being this little girl, long, pretty dark hair, which I had dark hair, but and in a bow and just fancy clothes. And I'm standing in a field with a husband, a dad that I love so much. He's in a suit and he's just like really wonderful man. And the mother's there, but she's not as prominent in this memory as the man. And we're waiting for this helicopter to land. And then we climb in the back. I can see the pilot and the co-pilot, and they turn and look at me as I'm, in the back with my parents, and they're talking to me, trying to calm me down because I'm a little scared of going up. And we start to go up, and that's the end of the memory. But I never forgot, it's like I feel the wind and see, our clothes blowing from the wind of this thing landing. And I'm like, that memory don't belong to me.
Hmm. Wow, that's really interesting, Peggy, because it's so vivid with many different details that you are right. He says, well, where did that come from? You know, and if I were working with you as in a trance, taking a look at, where did your soul go? Obviously, if it's a helicopter, it wasn't that long ago. It was probably just your very last life and something special about that woman, about that girl, about that life, about that helicopter trip, you need to revisit. So that's really interesting.
I just finally justified after years, this memory just kept, I was like, that isn't my memory. I know that never happened to me. And so I thought, well, maybe I saw it on TV. Maybe I just really wanted to be this little girl and really my imagination on steroids or something. Maybe I saw her, because it seems in black and white, the whole thing, like maybe black and white TV. But then a while ago, you said something about black and white pictures that comes in. So
Right,
I don't
right.
know. So I don't know.
Mhm.
But
But as I said, sometimes how people make their recollections, it can be black and white for some people, and it can be in vivid colors with someone else, depending upon like how clear things go too. And people have asked that. It's a very good question. Am I making this up? Did I see this before? And basically, I'd say, okay, let's take a look at that. We have probably seen hundreds, if not thousands, of shows. You know, why this particular memory?
yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
I've never
yeah.
thought of remembered a movie clip or anything. I always knew what movie it was. I never said, oh, I must have lived that. I never, only that one, and it's been with me my whole life. And I can never make sense. Why does that?
Uh,
That wasn't me. I know it wasn't me. I even asked my
uh-huh.
mom one time, like, I never went in a helicopter, right? She's like, no. I knew it wasn't me. I never had would have been around wealthy people to take me up. And I never had that long hair like that or nice clothes. So, and
Yeah, another body, another personality, another experience. But since you're so interested in like either out of body experiences or spiritual journeys and things like that, I would suggest that maybe you find a hypnotherapist that lives near you and pursue that. Find out where did that come from, what's the story there. I think it'll be very interesting.
I'm interested in not so much, reincarnation, but just like this out of body stuff, because my first NDE was 5-year-old drowning. It was all out of body. So I can sit here, as crazy as it sounds, and say I know what it's like to be a ghost, to try to get people's attention and talk to them. And then I talked to these old people sitting in this house at a table. I know they were dead, because they looked right at me, went through this door without opening, and I said, where can I find kids to play with? They said, check the graveyards. Okay, I didn't want to tell anybody about that memory for years, about the drowning, any of it, which, is NDE, but because I thought, why would ghosts be hanging around, especially kids, at a graveyard? That made no sense. But then somebody was on a while back and they said that there's some kind of car now that censors when people are ahead of you, and it shows a person on the screen on the dash. I forget what it's called. The newfangled cars. And and when you go through a graveyard, it shows pictures of people through the graveyard.
Wow.
Nobody's there.
Wow, interesting.
And I
Yeah.
said, well, maybe they really do hang on graveyards.
Uh-huh. Right, right. And that is a perhaps a place, a memory, that they had. And they are stuck there, and those are kind of like ghost stories, being stuck in a particular feeling and emotions. I've come across quite a few of them in my work. However, at some point, sometimes 10 years later, 20, 30, 40 years later, um, an angel comes or another soul that says, it's been a long time and I think it's time for you to move on. You are not getting anywhere. You're not, growing. You're kind of going around in circles. Come with me and let's start again.
Just a couple weeks ago, I was taking pictures down at the pond where I drowned, and my husband went and asked the lady that has since then built a house there. It's like she lets people pay to fish there and stuff, tackle shop. And so he went and asked, "It's okay if I take pictures?" So while he was doing that, I was walking along the train tracks taking pictures, and he caught up with me, and he said, "Yeah," she says, "It's okay." He said, he told her why I was taking pictures because I drowned there as a kid. And she says, "Oh, I believe it." She says, "The upstairs of this house is so haunted, my grandkids won't sleep up there." And I thought that was strange. Like,
Right, right. But having those different perspectives, that especially when you're kind of curious about the other world and souls and what happens after death, then it just opens up all kinds of possibilities. And unfortunately, a lot of the classic, larger faiths or institutions, they may have, let's say, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago, somebody had a near-death experience, tells like the local abbot or the bishop what happened, and then they say, oh, then this must be true for everyone. Because they love to put it into a doctrine. They love to say, "Oh, well, this is how it goes." Like in India, there's some Buddhists and Hindu beliefs that, oh, after you die, then there's going to be 7 days, or it could be like some people say 40 days, and then you will be free out of purgatory or out of bardo, and then you can move on. you know. But, in my experience, having done thousands of these sessions, it's not 7 days, it's not 40 days, it's always kind of variable, and it could be immediately and someone dies and they go, whoa, whew, suddenly I can fly. And then they take off. They just like go back to spirit, they go back to heaven, and they have a reunion with their soul family, and it's really quite joyful. But then there's others, especially if they were unhappy at the end, or they didn't agree how they died or how soon they died because they felt like they weren't finished, and they stick around. They like hang out in the woods or, in lonely, quiet places like cemeteries, just to have the peace, just to take a time out.
yeah, because when I drowned, a female voice said, "Don't go yet. If they find you soon, you might go back." And I think that's why that NDE was all out of body, because I wasn't supposed to go on to the next, because 20 years later I had another NDE, and it was a whole tunnel heaven experience. But what you're saying made me think of something I saw the other day. Somebody posted a video and of interview of this woman, I don't know who she was, and she was saying, they've studied so many NDEs that they can predict the next 100 NDEs. I thought, bull crap. You cannot predict what those NDEs are going to be like.
Right, right. It's so individual. Yeah, yeah. And everyone should be, unique, special, a personal enlightenment and so forth. And the interesting thing about this, with the NDEs is that someone has to almost, I mean, they die, right? And then they have these visions. Well, with my work, you don't have to die. It doesn't have to be so dramatic. You don't have to have all that physical pain. But you just have to leave the conscious awareness to the extent that you leave the present personality and connected with your soul, with your higher self. Then you can have the meta memories or the greater memories from another time, another place.
What do you say to the people that say this kind of work, or the ones that are having NDEs through the drug? I forget what it's called. Um, that claim these are NDEs. What do you say when people say, well, that opens you up to like evil spirits? Like you could be fooled in that space. Because I've heard that.
Yeah, yeah, especially if we're talking about like drug experiences, I find that especially if there were some souls who have turned into ghosts, the entities just did not leave. Some of them may have been drug addicts, alcoholics, and things like that, and they're so confused at the very end that they don't even know that they're either dead or it's time to go on or something like that because that confusion follows them even after death. And sometimes those types of souls love to hang out where other people go also into that semi aware state, such as in bars, such as in taverns and things like that. They're intoxicated, and then the lost soul gets kind of a contact high because that's what they enjoyed when they were in the body. And so this can be a place where people can get attachments, when they're not in their right mind, when they're just like intoxicated or on drugs or something like that. And then the soul comes knocking on their door and says, "Hey, let's hang out together." And then, very much like a small child, 6 years old or younger, they say, "Sure, come on," because they love their invisible friends. And this is the important part. We have free will. And if we say yes, then they can come in, they can hang out with us. If we say no, they cannot.
That's why I say it was so weird being at 5 years old, going around being this ghost. Because there's these two boys walking along the road carrying fishing poles. And I walked beside them. Hey, what are you doing? What are you doing? And they couldn't hear me. And then finally, the younger one started like telepathic, talking to me. And he's, oh, we've been fishing. We're running late. We got to hurry back. And, it's now that I'm older, I look back and I'm like, how many times I wonder, throughout our day is another spirit trying to get our attention and talk to us.
Exactly.
And we can even
Right.
be answering it back and thinking we're answering ourselves and just it's so subconscious.
True, true. And since we do have free will, even after death, we can, resolutely just stay here, go about fishing, hang out in the woods and things like that. And it's our right to be able to do that. But as I said, there comes a time when a wiser soul, a loving soul will say, I think you've been here for long enough. It's probably time to move on, because you're not progressing, you're not learning, you're stuck. And it's so good that they come in to do that. Oftentimes in my work, there can be these I don't want to say possessions, but it's much more like these lost souls are too close. They're just like right here hanging out. And sometimes someone might say, well, I don't know why I said that, right? That came from out of the blue. It's because their personality didn't say it. It's the soul that's right by their ear that said that or thinks that. And so almost like part of my work here is to, once we get really in touch with the higher self in this trance state, I ask, are there any lost souls around you? And sometimes they'll say, oh gosh, now that you mention it, oh, there's one, two, three, five, seven. There's these other souls, like two near me. And I say, okay, good. One may have a message for you. And that's why that soul is here. Find out what the message is, okay? But otherwise, it's time for them to leave. Allow them to go, release them, and then I ask for an angel of the Lord to come down, and oftentimes they'll describe, oh my goodness, look at this with the beautiful wings, and they are escorted back to spirit, back to heaven, back to a higher plane. Because, yeah, that is partly even, unconsciously why someone comes to me as a client, because, hey, I've got this pack of personalities, kind of confusing my life. I don't know where my ideas come from, or where someone else's thoughts are interfering with mine. And it's time to release. It's time to clean things out, let go, and then an opportunity then for them to be freed.
Makes me think of Dr. George Ritchie, his book, Return from Tomorrow, about his NDE. He's now passed on, but he was a young man in the military and went to a medical facility just to get transferred out to go switching to go to another place for medical school because he had some medical school background. So they were going to take him from just being a regular soldier to medical school. He's so excited. It was a Christmas time and the medical school was near his family. So he was all psyched. He got real bad. I think it was pneumonia and he died. And he was out of his body and he was doing like what you said. He stopped down. He stopped down at this bar and he saw spirits trying to get a drink, trying to get a smoke. And so, elaborate NDE, and then he come back to his body and he noticed that was him laying there because of his ring. And by chance, he didn't know at the time, but I guess like an orderly asked the doctor if he would inject adrenaline in his heart, try to bring him back. And the doctor did, and he come back. And so years later, he decided he would become a psychiatrist. And he's a medical doctor, but decided he would become a psychiatrist, but he had just come out publicly about his near-death experience, which was unheard of back then. And he had to go in front of a review board to become a psychiatrist. And they asked him about his near-death experience. And he told them the truth. Yes, I own it. Yes, that happened, etc. And they said they passed him on. They said if you had denied it, we would have denied you. But because you're, stuck to and so, there was a psychiatrist back when this wasn't accepted, going from medical doctor to psychiatrist that had this experience that saw exactly what you're talking about. And George Ritchie, and a little tiny book. I think you almost get it free online. Return from Tomorrow, and I think it's the best NDE book out there. And I've given it to people as gifts before, but I mean, he saw that people lost out there. They're roaming
Indeed,
around.
indeed. Right, right. And they not only like to hang around bars and so forth, but also hospitals where they give narcotics and opiates and things like that, because that's also kind of a high. It's also kind of like getting out of consciousness, and they love to be around such things. This is not all souls, not all, departed ones, but those who had a bit more of addictive personalities, and they just continue when they die. But
That's
the interesting thing there too is that that medical board, I mean, I'd have to say, bless their hearts, because many times they say, of course, this is not true. Okay, this cannot happen. This is not in our understanding
mhm.
of how the psyche works. So you are not fit to help other people, to find their way in psychiatry or psychology, because of course that does not fit into our perceptions of psychology. The interesting idea too, the root word of psychology is psyche, and that is Greek for soul.
Oh,
And so it's the study of soul, but then they forgot about that. And classically in medical institutions, educational institutions, it is the study of the mind, not the soul. So they've kind of lost their roots, a lot of them. So I'm glad to hear that they were open enough to believe in such things.
yeah. And something you said, Walker, made me think, anybody that knows anybody that is drug addicted or alcoholic, it's like they're possessed. Maybe they are.
It could be, right. And if we have, let's say, someone who's really, naturally prone to be addictive, Then they go to a bar and very much like, a young child that says, "Oh, you invisible friend. Yeah, you can hang out with me." But sometimes when you're a little bit older, it's more like misery loves company, and I'm feeling bad. I'm feeling depressed. That's why I drink. And then this entity or this soul says, "Oh, I feel exactly the same way. Can we hang out together?" And of course, if they're not in their right mind, they say, "Sure, come on in." You know, and so these souls can double or triple the influence of alcohol or altered states and things like that. It just, makes it even more intense. And it's not just, a one person having let's say an opioid experience, but there's one, two, three other entities, and they're all high together. It's really quite a phenomenon.
And you could really stretch your imagination when you start thinking about food addiction and sex addiction and gambling addictions. I mean,
Right, right. Yeah, yeah. And there may be other souls just around, let's say not necessarily attached to someone, but they're kind of floating around, they're kind of curious and going through town and things like that. Um, and they'll be curious about, "Oh, there's some noise over here in this house. What's that about?" And then they go in, because of course they can, go through doors, they can go through walls because, they don't have a body. And wow, suddenly, yeah, someone is practicing some sort of pleasure, and but they're not alone. They've got some people who are watching and co-experiencing, probably again with the memory. "Oh yeah, when I had a body, I really loved to do that." And here, this person is also in this great sense of pleasure, and wow, and through that, it's a vicarious experience of I feel again that emotional or physical pleasure.
and this might be related in some way, somehow, I don't know, but m- a lot of us NDEers, when we share our NDE and we're back there, and it's like, makes me think, are we just like get so connected to our soul or our normal day, we forget about it. But like we feel like we could even levitate. I mean, like our is our feet touching the floor? We get into that, and it's so that would be like possessions of ourselves because it's we get back into that soul part of us I mean it's always there, I'm sure, but I mean in touch with it to where we're not our body or mind or what people think. Like when I go and like mainly like in person, like in a group or something or a conference, and I'm up there alone, just me, and all these eyes are on me, and normally I would be nervous, I would run out the door, but I just say a little prayer, God to help me and speak through me. And it's just like I've taken a back seat and this other is effortless. Like I don't have to practice. I don't have to take notes. It's effortless. Like I don't hardly stumble with words. It's just, it born like its own entity, its own thing. And afterwards, it takes a long time to come off that high.
That's really great, and to describe it as a high, because that each and every one of us with our own personal soul, it is wiser, more experienced, having probably had various past lives, the spiritual realm, greater understanding, contacts with even higher spirits, such wisdom, such understanding. And if we can get out of our little personalities, and stretch into this wiser, more loving, understanding soul, wow, that would be really great to hold on to that. And oftentimes I think if we can get out of the way of our present worries and small thinking and so forth, and just say, may the higher wisdom flow through me, the understanding, compassion, love, wisdom, may that just flow through me and get my little brain out of the way.
Right. And I think that's the audience's attraction to it. I think when we set ourselves free, and like we're in that realm, like when I talk about the drowning, suddenly I'm hovering over the pond again and I'm experiencing everything again. And I'm like given a live eyewitness view. And then I talk about the second NDE, the tunnel and bright light and everything. And I'm in there and I'm in the bright white light, which both those things are hovering. Those are memories of hovering. And one over the pond, the other one's hovering in this bright white light, and they're hovering, and I'm remembering this hovering and everything that happened in that without a body or brain. And I think when other people tell their stories, and they're out of their body, I think must be on some deep soul level, people that watch them feel that, get in touch with their own soul and lift up. And and I pray to God people ain't lying and misleading people, you know but because it's just not right. But the people that have actually been there and are experiencing it, and I think other people get to experience it through their soul's eyes.
Exactly, right. And it's so much richer than our present limitations. I mean, the colors, the expansiveness, the feelings. I mean, it's like 10 times, let's say, what we might perceive right now, even on a great day, even when we're excited, when we just compare that to a higher, really a higher awareness, and therefore more of a memory of our soul that has been ecstatic, expanded, wise, and connected with other souls in unity and love. Wow, that is a high. That is like so much greater than kind of like our everyday world.
Yeah.
So I can totally understand why people would like to go back to that.
Yeah. And there's something about that space, and I'm assuming when what you do with people, the hypnotism or people listening to somebody's NDE, or when you get into that space with that person, or that person enters back into that space, there is something about that. You said something like wisdom. There's this knowledge, because there, even though you may not see them or hear them, notice them, I call it the land of all knowing. Like knowledge can come to you in that it's almost like a creative space. It's an intelligent and it's a creative space where visions can come, and like, oh, like a learning aid just taught you something, or a voice can come, and, oh, I didn't realize, or just a knowing. And so many people has had NDEs will say, I was told it's not my time. I was told to come back. I was told this, that. And it makes you wonder, who is there? Who is telling this? Who's deciding this? How are they collecting this knowledge?
So right. And yeah, they're being told, and so they're being told by someone. And oftentimes, in my experience, it is your spirit guide, your guardian angel, a higher advisor, maybe even something closer to the elders or the wise ones, that got the larger perspective, aiding us in our own personal growth and expansion, and saying, yep, yep, you needed to have this experience to recollect, to remember the bigger picture and why you're here and so forth. Now that you've got it, take that richness and inspiration and go back to your body and share it with other people.
And people that think this is all just ridiculous, which is good, because you do have to keep your common sense about you and choose wisely what you buy into. But it could be something as simple as, like, yesterday I was painting right outside here, which is second story, and I was standing on scaffolding and I was reaching to paint, and something's like, Peggy, you sit your butt down right now before you fall, And we all know we get those times, about to cross the street and it's just like something pulls us back. And I think if people can remember those little things in their life they've had like that, that's what we're talking about. You know,
Exactly. Right.
it's
Right. And
that
we're, we're,
other
we're they're
side.
watching us, caring for us, especially when we err our way, when we get off track, when we're in danger, and it's really not our time. So yeah, we have got guidance and inspiration, and I think that's coming from another world and from the spirit world.
And if the scientists could stop rolling their eyes long enough
Right.
to say, okay, let's seriously study and see, try to prove us wrong, and see what is right in it. Because there is probably a lot of wrong that we've got wrong, that we've assumed, that maybe our imaginations got away with this. But within all that, there has got to be a science of this soul that we all encase. They study the body, they study the atmosphere, they study the weather, they just study all these things. But the soul just seems to be, I mean, the moment someone dies, the family's in the room, the doctors, nurses, whatever, you have the machines that tell you they just died, but the family knows, oh, you know, you can feel it. They're no longer in there. You come in, you got there late and there's your mother. She just passed. You don't have to even get close. She passed. I mean, it's just, there's a knowing they're no longer here. And then your question is, well, where are they? Where did they go? There's no,
Exactly.
and the
Right.
body's still here, but something isn't here.
Exactly. Right. And in that death moment, it's just within seconds that that someone was breathing, there was a life form, and then boom, it's finished. It's gone. But what is gone? Right? Of course, you and I, we know it's the soul. The soul left the body. The body is finished. Dust to dust. It has animated this body, and it's a fabulous machine. But it came to an end, and it's time to move on. Peggy, I'm reminded of a story that my grandmother told me. Kind of a simple woman born in Arkansas, and she had two children, and she was sitting on the porch. The kids were off playing maybe a mile or so away. Back then it was like, yeah, see you later, kids. So they were both quite young. I think maybe the oldest was maybe 6 or 7. But anyway, they were gone, off playing. She was sitting on the porch. Then she looks out something like uh, 50 yards away. There was this little round light, just this light that far away, coming closer. Then it came closer to her, came closer to her, and then it entered her and left and went through her and went to the other side, just kept on going. This light, this ball came around, boom, then kept on going. And she said, my son just died.
Oh,
And she was right. And that little ball was her boy coming in
run into his mom.
to through her heart to say, Mom, thank you.
He went to her. I've told this many times, so I won't get in a lot of detail, but the week before my second NDE was here on this property on Easter Sunday, and I heard my oldest son, Matthew, yell, Mom, Jeremy. That was the second oldest son, and my husband went running to see what was wrong, and I was frozen in fear. I was too scared to move because that scream just said something horrible. And I just stood there praying to God that, that I wouldn't lose my son. Then all of a sudden, I didn't know why I had this knowing what had happened to him. That we had bought this property and the creek was always shallow. And so wouldn't even think of him drowning, but something just let me know we've had a lot of melting snow and rain, and it's swift. It's the creek's up, but it's not too deep that if he would calm down and stand up, he'd be all right. So immediately I just like instinctively started praying, Jeremy, in my mind, silently, Jeremy, stand up, calm down. It's not that deep. Walk out of there. And I slowly walked down, just watching, scared death. My husband's going to come carry my dead child. And so I'm so scared. And I'm back still praying to God. And then I see Jeremy jump up right past his dad and look at him, comes, Mom, was you worried about me? And um, he was 5. When he was 20, I told that story for the first time because that's all I knew of the story. But I was just like, this happened, and I was just so scared. And Jeremy stepped out of, I say he's 20 years old now, and he steps out of the kitchen for making a drink with his girlfriend. He said, "Mom, I heard you praying." What? He said, "That's what it was." He said, "I was trying to swim, and I heard you say, 'Jeremy, calm down, stand up. It's not that deep, walk out of there.' So I stood up and walked out." And I didn't know till a couple weeks ago. He said, "Mom," he said, "I was like a drone, like I was hovering. I saw you over top of you standing there praying." And I said, "Jeremy, that was in your death experience." Of course, he told me he's 42 now, and he said that. But when he was 20, I didn't have the word near death experience, or I just like me and everybody's mouth in the room dropped, like, what? And his friend Luke says, "That's a mother's love right there." What did we make of it? How do you understand that? Well, now that I'm older, and it's just, I can see how spirits can connect, a mother like that, just be able to see that and feel her son go through. And my heart just goes for her, because any, mother, parent loses a child is just more than anybody should have to bear.
Indeed, indeed. And a part of the interesting magic of that is something that we normally call women's intuition or the mother's instinct. And scientists have a kind of a tough time with this, but some of them are kind of fascinated. The fact that you can be far away, even hundreds of miles away, the mother child, and there is this link, that what's going on. If the baby is unhappy, you're unhappy, and so forth. And again, scientists don't know how to interpret that. They don't know what's going on. But there's so many anecdotes. There's so many stories of this is what I was feeling, and it was true. And this person was far away, and so validation of this invisible cord connection with a loved one that is, giving information back and forth intuitively, telepathically, that connection that, again, women and mothers typically have it stronger because you have to be a little bit more intuitive and sensitive to really feel it, get it.
And in 2000, it was before 9/11. I was working in an emergency room, and it was slow one night. It's kind of roaming around the hall, and this old man was standing outside the room that had door shut, where they were checking on his wife, and we got talking. And I remember he looked like Santa Claus, the white hair and beard, and he said that he told me how he became a preacher. Said he God started telling him to be a preacher, and he's, "Man, don't ask me this. I don't want to." And he became a preacher, and he's standing there talking to me, sweetest guy. And he says, "Let me tell you, he's one thing I've come to know is that mother's prayers, the power of a mother's prayers, people just don't realize." And so my son was in the military. So I just started praying for my son all the time. When I was so happy on Mother's Day that he got out of the military, but then 9/11 happened, and he went behind my back and re-enlisted and was about to board the plane before he called and told me.
Wow.
So now he was over in Afghanistan. And so I'm praying all the time, so scared. And every time the song Simple Man would come on, it would just trigger me. And I would just start praying, "God, please let him know the love of a wife," because the song says something about the love of a woman or something. Just be a simple man. Let him live long enough to get married and have children and know that. I want him to know that. I didn't want to die over there and never know that. And that was always my prayer every time that song come on. And I kid you not, after he was home, he got injured in Afghanistan. The wind, oh my gosh, that's weird. The wind of a helicopter threw him off the roof. We were just talking about helicopter. That's strange. I never made that connection before, but the wind of a helicopter threw his what the guy was over him, was a sergeant or what, threw him off. So my son went to the edge to look see he was okay, and he got thrown off by the wind, and he got hurt worse than the sergeant did.
Oh my goodness.
And so they did surgery on his leg, and they were talking about maybe have to amputate. Anyway, he got to come home. So now he's home and he's taking online school, college, and everything. And I'm babysitting. Went through divorce, so I'm babysitting his kids, and while he's working and going to college online. And so one day in the kitchen, he told me a story one time. Usually he didn't talk about the military, and it just gave me chills. He says, "Mom," he says, "I gotta tell you something." He says, of course, he didn't know that I was always praying for him in that song. And one day in Afghanistan, there's all on back of a truck, and the radio was on, and they were all talking, and all of a sudden, Simple Band come on the radio, and all the guys stopped talking. Everybody got quiet to hear that song, and they heard something in the woods. They were about to be ambushed because that song was on, and they were all quiet. They had a moment to prepare, and it was bad for their side and not our side. And he says, Mom, every other time that was not good on our side when those ambush happened. It was the only time that it was, good for us. And he says, only because that song come on. And I'm like, oh my God, mother's prayer. I was like, I will never stop praying for my children, three
Uh-huh.
children, because
Exactly.
that is just too much of a coincidence to be a coincidence.
Indeed, right. And using a popular song like that too, as like the message bearer from thousands of miles away. That's really quite amazing. And again, the physicists, the scientists, they just, they're so stuck into the physical world that they can't get into the paraphysical world or the paranormal world to say, there's some stuff going on here too, that if we pay attention to it, we can probably advance even further.
And remote viewing. My understanding is the military has used remote viewing for a long time, where
That's
they
right.
can pinpoint exactly where people are, and there's no way they would know where these hostages are or whatever.
Right,
No
right.
way.
Yeah, and military will use whatever means necessary to, further their goal. Yeah, but the classic scientists probably, they say, there's nothing to that. They're just pretty lucky. Of course, you can't be lucky that often.
And I've read where medical science has done experiments, have monks pray and thousands of miles away, pray for these cancer cells to heal the cells of cancer, because they can do a spray, and they get cured. And the others that's not prayed over don't. And the experiments where people are in the hospital, they'll pray for 50% of them and not the other 50%. They just know they're in the study and they don't know which one's being prayed for was, and then the ones do a lot better that were prayed for. And so it's like, come on, people, get on board.
Uh,
Let's figure out what are we getting wrong and what are we getting right and what else do we need to learn? Because if I can save my son through prayer, I want us all to learn how. When my son, I mean, I understand now, because he was underwater, and I, probably because maybe I had drowned before, I'd been out of body before, that our souls was able to connect. But at the time, after he was 20, I was just, shocked, like, what? He heard me praying, then decades of thinking about it. It's like, you know, there's got to be a sixth sense that we just, don't want to talk about. Because like when you first started talking about spirits and stuff, and like there's a whole bunch of people turning that off. I'm not listening to that nonsense.
right,
You're
right.
talking
Yeah.
about ghosts and this and that. Done.
Hmm.
Well, I used to be one of those people. I was the kid. Only one in my family did not want to hear the ghost stories because my dad and my sister would say there was a ghost in the house when he was remarried to my stepmom, and they would put a cross above the door. I would roll my eyes. They say they get up at night and she was looking in the refrigerator like, oh my God. I heard so much nonsense. And my grandma, my mom's mom, she was always telling me this, that like psychics, it's witchcraft, and fortune telling, it's witchcraft. And, so I heard all these things, but I had all these memories. And after my second NDE, started a lot of psychic stuff with me that I couldn't tell anybody. And I would not be talking about this in public, let alone on a podcast, unless I was retired from social work, because your reputation's everything. You can't be a social worker, counselor, working in corrections, investigations, and be talking about ghosts.
So true, so true, right? And so here we have then now the peer pressure from a particular group or an institution or the medical world or something like that, that even stops the inquiry into such things. And so that's death to research, to free thinking, to investigation. That's amazing. For several years, I lived in Washington, D.C., and I was doing my work there, and I had many clients who just said, "Oh, wow, Stephen, this is, such a great experience. I've learned a lot. I understand the cause and the effect. I understand, like my mission in life and so forth. Thank you for this." And then they wouldn't recommend me to their colleagues because it's the federal, system over there. It's Washington, D.C., everybody, working for the government. And so they couldn't refer me because they didn't want people to start talking about them, that they believe in such things. It was
Right.
it was a bit frustrating for sure.
Credibility.
Yeah, right. And the group think or the group mind that says, this is true, this is not true, and it takes an individual to have like a near-death experience or an unusual thing, or me listening to my grandmother, about her little soul, coming to visit her after death. It's like when we really start paying attention to the out of the ordinary, then we go, wow, life is much bigger, more interesting, more intricate than we thought. But the systems, the various types of systems, really pushing towards a certain type of conformity. It just says, stop, don't think, don't look, don't go in that direction. And that stops it. That just stops the growth, stops the curiosity.
But I think our government knows way, way more than we could even imagine about this kind of thing. And somebody told me the other day that this is maybe off topic, but maybe it's not. They know people in top Hollywood that are going to these some kind of chat rooms with billionaires, and it's all some kind of satanic cult, supernatural. I don't know. I could think I didn't want to know or hear it all. And they're trying to bring more people in. And the people that say, no, I don't want in that, they are ruining them. So, what we're talking about is just our own curiosity, what we're trying to investigate and learn and our understanding. And then we're feeling like, oh, if we have a government job, we would be like ridiculed. But then again, I'm told like stuff like that, like stuff's going on that I think maybe they know a lot. They meaning science and medical, military, whatever, whoever, that they're keeping private for them to have some kind of huge secret that if you don't come into it once you're invited, like they will ruin your life.
Well, here is we're in 2024, and this is a an election year, and the politicians are out giving their speeches and so forth, but they dare not talk about what we're talking about, because they are afraid of what the public would respond to that. Oh my goodness, this person has lost his mind, believes in souls, believes in the afterlife, angels. I mean, what the heck? And so there is, at the same time that we've got these individuals, maybe some think tanks, maybe some programs, like remote viewing and so forth, and they are really working with this type of material. But then, there's this other side that says, no, do not go there, do not discuss it. And that, of course, shuts down the whole conversation.
And CERN, like what are they doing? What are they learning? What are they finding out? Where are they what are they capturing? I seen something the other day. It said, I don't, whatever molecule or whatever those are called. It's the most expensive thing in the universe, and it was something they found at CERN, like some. I want to use the word molecule because I don't know what it is.
Is that the one that's called the God molecule?
I don't know.
Yeah, because that was a few years ago.
Yeah, no, it's whatever it is they're crushing and an atom or whatever it is that they're doing, whatever that thing is the most expensive thing on the universe because of the money it's taking at CERN to study it, to
Right,
create that
right.
little whatever it is, unknown matter, dark matter, whatever.
Hmm. Right, right. And so again, that shows that, there are some experiments even within the system that goes into these otherworldly directions. And I'm glad to hear about that, shows that there is, something going on. But then there's so many others that just says, nope, we're not going to discuss it. I'm not going to refer you. I'm not going to talk about it, on the political stump speeches. But in the University of Virginia for many years, there was this Dr. Stevenson who, and I was just surprised that this was happening in a university. And for years, he interviewed young children and asked, these were children who spoke about past lives. And some of them were in really great detail. I can tell you about me being in this village, and I was married to that person, and this was my brother-in-law. Really, clear things. And he, Dr. Stevenson, went around the world and interviewed these kids, put it into some research books, and it's out there, and it's been out there for decades. That wow, these are the cases that is pointing towards that there is this thing called reincarnation. And so it's a good study, really, fairly done, thoroughly done, and not only, taking the interviews from the kids, but then they would sometimes then go to the village that they talked about and verify this information. And there's just no way that that child would know about these people and these things and these jobs and these other things. So it's really great that, in an institution of higher learning, that something like that is going on, was going on. And, but sometimes it's really just, the exception and not the rule.
I read something recently that was saying kids' IQ, that when they're infants, how high the IQ is, and then it's like when they start school, it just goes down and down and down and down. And it's like,
Right.
what are we doing to children where they have to sit in chairs, learn, rehearse, repeat, it just take all the creativity out of them. And but you can be creative in this way with this type music in this way, or you can be creative in sports in this way, or in art only in this way, but not just let them, flourish and like we're stunting their growth spiritually.
So true. I've given the advice for many decades now of parents with young children. And I say, why don't you take the time to ask them kind of an unusual question or two, like, do you remember when you had another body? Or did you have another family before us? Things that, normally parents would never ask a child. And you'll be surprised at what they tell you. And that once the children start to go to school, they will forget that. They forget the spirit world. They forget, other levels of consciousness because they go towards this conformity thing, first grade, second grade, third grade. And sometimes it's, adults saying, oh, stop making things up, you know and but otherwise it's this conformity thing that when I imagine yourself as a 6-year-old, when I talk about my invisible friends or having an out-of-body experience, the other kids make fun of me, so I will not talk about it anymore, and it shuts things down.
Well, I imagine a lot of kids get put on medication.
Right, right. Yeah, hallucinations.
Yeah. I remember one of my granddaughters when she was an infant, Her parents told me, said she just will look at the wall and you could tell she's seeing someone. Her eyes are
Yeah.
following it. She would do
Yeah.
it all the time for the longest time.
Yeah.
And
Kids do that a lot.
another child, one time she was telling me, uh, she was in the pool and mom and dad and her brother, they kind of got separated a little bit, and she slipped under the water and she couldn't get back up, and she was a little scared at first, and then she starts giggling, and she says, and it was so cool, and she says, I could hear mom telling dad, I can't find her, and she was looking around like this. And you were underwater? Yeah, I was underwater. And she saw all this and she heard this and she seen her mom's emotions, and dad wasn't really paying attention and stuff. And so I turned to the mother and I was like, she had a near death experience. And the mom was like, don't you dare put that in her head. And I'm like, okay. I didn't put in her head, but okay. But then later, this girl, she would tell me every now and then she'd and giggle and smile when she would get to the part where all that, and I just keep quiet. Is, and why should she know she had a near death experience? I guess so she can understand this is normal. It happens.
Right.
And
Right.
and
Yeah.
that if you notice things happening after that, well, this is why. And don't be afraid, find someone that you can share, if she's starting to see, not that you would put it in her head, but if strange things happen that you can't explain, that doesn't happen. You don't hear other people talking about, say, because I know after my drowning, I woke up from a nap and there was three people. I know they were ghosts because they were dressed like they were from 100 years ago, staring by my bed, looking down at me. And I kept closing my eyes like, go away. And then I opened them, finally they were gone. So I went in the kitchen, told my mom, and she's, nobody's here. And I said, well, they were standing right there. She's, well, only people I know, that's, people right up the road, they, almost like Amish, lived, had no running water, electric. And so my sister got home from school, I made her go up to the house and see if they still live there. Because I was just curious, who were these people? Why were they? Because they were real people and it was abandoned, nobody was there. But because in my mind, they were that real that, I want to find out like where they live, what they doing, why they in my room. But
Mhm.
it's just different
But
little things, as a kid.
right, right. And your intuition really good, your abilities to perceive things beyond the senses, the five senses. Yeah, you've obviously had that for a long time. Have you also come across the out of body experiences, not near death, but out of body?
I had out of body at 16. I was kidnapped and raped, and I was praying. I wasn't even on this earth. And suddenly I was up in the night sky looking down at earth like you would look down at a globe, like you see in science class. It looked just like that, all the shades of white and darker colors as I was up. And I felt the wind blow. I had long brown hair, felt just like you was at a beach, that beautiful, calming, warm breeze. And I looked down at earth and I remember thinking at 16, wow, imagine how heavy that earth is, but it's floating in space just like I am, like weightless. And I'm thinking, it must be a soul too. So then I thought, well, gosh, I think I need to go back because I'm only 16. I don't want to stay up here forever. I want to live my life. And, I come back and rape was over. And I knew he had raped me, even though I wasn't there physically or mentally, because he said, well, I want a wife like you someday. And I thought, I must have laid there, like a board, that's what he wants in a wife, I guess. And because I wasn't
Right.
there. And so that made it really difficult when the next day I got away from him and I was with the police, and they was taking me to the hospital for an exam for rape, and they said, did you tell him no? Well, I wasn't there and I couldn't tell him I was out of body. I couldn't tell him that I was up in space.
Right, right. Back
Because
back to what can we say or not?
I'm going to
Yeah.
go to psych ward. I have a older sister that's severely mentally ill. I know what mental hospitals look like. And I don't go to mental. So he just got statutory rape because he was older. But so I thought it was real important later that I start talking about it, because how can we teach girls, like maybe even women wouldn't even know? You didn't consent if you were out of body. Don't feel guilty or feel like you consented or you didn't fight if you were not there.
True, true.
And let it
But,
be
but
okay to say what you experienced. But
Indeed, yeah, yeah. And so that's a whole other interesting arena of awareness and experience. Not a near death experience, but leaving the body, so our soul can go. And sometimes in our sleep, especially when we have our flying dreams, we're probably out, flying really, and it's not just a dream of flying, but an out of body. And wow, that opens up a whole other arena of interest.
I was just as out of body as I was at the drowning. Only at the drowning, I never went higher than treetops. Where this, I was praying that I wasn't even, I didn't think I would actually be out of this, or I was praying, I meant dead, is what I meant. When I said, I wish I wasn't even on this earth. Because I said, my whole family doesn't like me and they're really going to hate me now for what I am about to do because this man was black out of Southeast Ohio. And I knew they was all really prejudiced and they were going to hate me and blame me for this black man having sex with this black man, which I couldn't fight because he had these tools. He threatened to drop me in this lake and stuff. And I knew if I fought, I was going to be dead. So I couldn't fight. And it's horrible to not be able to fight back. And so I prayed that I wish I were on this earth. And suddenly I was up there. And that was so hidden inside of me that I was 16 and I was in my 40s. And I told my daughter-in-law one day, I said, I watch these movies about women's raped and I feel like it's happened to me, but I never was raped. And I got thinking about it later. I thought, you most certainly were. Just because I
So
didn't fight and I didn't say no. He knew I tried to get away all night before this. He wouldn't let me go. And so I thought all along I must have consented because I didn't fight. And so,
Mhm.
and then I realized that out of body, and I didn't have the words even out of body in my 40s, not until my 50s, when I started hearing about NDEs and out of body experiences, like, that's what that was.
Right, 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 because you did not want to be there,
Yeah.
right? And so you escaped, you left.
Yeah. And when I was hearing NDEs, I was hearing out of bodies and NDEs, like my drowning, that was out of body. And I thought, but wait a minute, this wasn't a death. It was like a
No,
spiritual death or something. And so first time I told my NDE in Columbus, Ohio, and at the end, people were asking questions, and this one black lady was there. She's a nurse, like psychiatric nurse, and she said, that is called, oh, it starts with a D. I don't want to say dementia, that's not it.
dissociation.
Thank you. That's dissociation. She says in my practice, she works with abused children, and that's quite frequent. And so she was saying that wasn't out of body dissociation. I'm thinking, I'm keeping the out of body. I don't like the dissociation because God rescued me. I prayed to God. I wasn't there I wasn't on this earth, and that's exactly where He took me. I did not
Hmm.
imagine it. I did not dream it. It was God rescued. And when I first come back, I thought, was that a prayer answered? Was that a wish come true? Was that God? Or do I have some kind of ability that if I wished I was on the moon, I'd be on the moon? I didn't understand.
Hmm.
And so then I got thinking, after hearing so many NDEs and sometimes it's through abuse and I'm hearing their stories, or I watch a true story on movie, somebody's kidnapped and put in a box or a basement or whatever, and they tend to have these out of body experiences. And I'm thinking, that there's something to this and some people in their NDEs say a plane's about to crash, they leave their body before they crashed. People talk about 9/11, they say, hey, those people probably left their soul before they ever hit the concrete.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. And the souls can do that. So, to avoid the pain, same thing with, witches being burned, for not being good Christians. And, but they didn't feel the pain. They left before it happened, and thank goodness for that.
And what does that say about our human bodies and our soul that we have that ability? Scientists are now admitting that the moments before death, there are these heightened psychological arousal experiences. And say someone with dementia who hasn't been able to speak or recognize her family in years suddenly looks right at them and calls them by name and say like something like, my husband was just here, he's coming to take me home, and tell, say the will was in so and so, and or whatever, be very clear. And so they're realizing that there is some kind of surge. Even they do the experiments with mice, and they say there's electrical surge of, mental activity the moment of death. I'm like, okay, why? If we get cut, we scab over. We shave our head, our hair goes back. Our bodies are amazing. So why not wonder, why is the body doing that? Why is the body giving us that extra oomph at the moment of death? And now they're finding out that actually once your heart stops and everything, you stop breathing, there's actually hours there that you could be revived. There's hours there that there's enough, like in the far part of this brain or something, that could be, that we could be brought back, like everything is stored. So, I mean, they keep rolling their eyes, they keep laughing at us, they keep whatever, but I'm like, come on, people. Like, my dream is like if they would open this a big university just to study this stuff. Not
Right.
like, not to criticize Virginia, but not paranormal, and not some of the stuff I see them studying, but actual serious, what is our soul? What is it capable of? What has it been known to do? And can it be replicated? And
Exactly. Right.
how is it replicated? When is it replicated? What makes it more likely to be, because I feel we have this magic at our fingertips that we're not accessing, which I know, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, because that's what you do with your career and helping these people touch that place.
Right, right. And interestingly enough, that would be a wonderful type of university, metaphysical university, let's say. But it would not be accredited, and therefore they would not get any funding, because the rest of the academic world would say, this is a waste of time, and it's none of this is true. And then it stopped, and that's why there is not such an institution like that.
I see if I can remember exactly. No, can't. But I saw the other day, University of Michigan had 3 doctors that were studying near-death experiences. And I emailed all 3. They had had some training on it to see if any of them would want to be on my show. Of course, I know they're not going to, because, right, this is beneath them. But I still had to reach out, and I sent them a copy of my book, and I, and link to my show, because, put it out there that we're talking about this. They're studying it, so we could build that bridge between us woohoos out here and the scientists that are trying to study it. But because at some point, see, we got to get past the stories, because that's all we're doing right now. We're having these videos and we're sharing people's NDEs. And that's all people want, is to be entertained and reassured that they're going to have a wonderful afterlife. They don't want the hell NDE. They don't want an NDE that's not too detailed. They're very
No, they don't
picky.
want, they don't want the pain. No.
They do
Yeah.
reincarnate. A lot of them do. Some like don't even go there. But like, we got to get past the stories. And I'm really losing interest in the NDE stories. I'm going to start having more, instead of near-death experience, life experience. People would come on, and I'm looking more for seniors, or maybe someone that's dying, and give them the floor and let them share their life experience or some story they'd like to tell, or it could be something happened to their grandma, whatever it is that they want to leave this world with before they go. This is
That's a
what
pretty good
happened
idea.
here. This is what I
Yeah,
say.
exactly. Things you've learned along the way. And what would you like your legacy to be? What would you like to pass on to the next generation? That would be very important, very useful.
Because I don't think people are sitting down with the elderly and listening.
Hmm.
They're on their phones watching YouTube, so get them on YouTube. I mean, I've
True.
done 400, shows about near-death experiences, and I think we need to, I'm going to personally, for me, I'm going to start focusing on life experiences because
Hmm.
there's more to life than death.
Exactly. Good. Well, I mean, I could be an example of you kind of like moving off in a different direction because it's not really near-death experience that I'm talking about.
Right.
I'm talking about, the soul and what happens and the entities and the ghosts and reincarnation, and that there is a continuity beyond our small, little bodies and that goes off into other realms of awareness. And it's a rich and varied journey that is not just, even though you know from near-death experiences that someone could be dead for like 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then it feels or they start narrating their experiences that must have been like 2, 3, 4 hours. So you go away from our present personality and the concept of time changes, you know, and 4 minutes here is like 2 hours there, you know. So time can be malleable too,
Mhm.
and that's really quite interesting. But when we really talk about what have I learned in my life, especially as, an elderly person, that and what can I advise, those younger people, you know, who, by the way, you probably know this, so many of them are disappointed with what they've been giving. They say, okay, you get a job, you have your family, 2.4 children, you know, and get yourself a truck. It's like, and then a lot of them would say, is that it? Is that all? Is that all? It's like, no, no, it is bigger than that. It is really fabulous, and you can have a rich life way beyond what they're trying to sell you.
I heard a phrase one time that I love. It said, work more or want less.
Right, right. Otherwise, you're on that machine,
Yeah.
just going, produce, produce, make money, but no, no, there and all the different ways that one can enjoy life without money, without, being on the treadmill.
Yeah. I mean, people work so hard to make all that money and they die and it's still in the bank.
Right, right. And they're saving for a rainy day.
Yeah. Yeah. And so retirement's great, but boy, you can look back too and think, I could have done things a lot simpler.
Exactly, right. Or I was so busy making a living that some of the dreams that I had, I put them on hold, and now it's too late.
Yeah. And when we have kids and they're grown, like, gosh, I should have spent more time. I was focused on career and going to school. And, for me, I was doing all these foster care and stuff. And I can't hardly remember my kids growing up. And then they say, Mom, I don't remember much of my childhood. I'm like, well, I don't either. You
Right,
know?
right. But we're back to, passing on the wisdom from, people who have been around the block and saying, wow, the quality time spent with loved ones, that is so important. And life, especially the pressures of economic life, pull us away constantly from what really matters.
I've said before when I was 25 and I first entered the bright white light, I thought, crap, I'm dead. And I felt all this regret. Like it was going to be like I never lived because my boys was too young. They'd forget about me in time. And I never really spoke up. I never told things that happened to me or said how I felt or really I was just like this, just trying to fit in, trying to be the perfect wife and mom, trying to be enough for everybody, you know, cook enough, garden enough, can enough, just and and so when I come back, I just was left with this. I think I want to go to college. I think I want to have a career in this. I think I'm going to start speaking up about this. I don't think that's right. And I started speaking up to where, I am now. I speak my opinion. Um, and then you learn to let other people speak theirs and listen.
Right.
But that's why I think, too, I just want to hear people's life experiences and give them that voice. Because I would, to help them maybe in a small way when they pass, that they don't have that regret. That I wish I
Right.
could have, told everyone, or wish I could have shared my life story with the kids. And well, I was 55 when I wrote my memoir, and it just come to me one day. And all I was going to do is type it up and put it away and tell my kids, I want all my grandchildren to have a copy of this when I die, thinking they'll be adults by then, because there's so much I want to tell them. They're too young to hear.
Right.
And I just want them to know what, because I'd love to read a story, a book on my grandma's lives, my grandpa's, my greats, and we don't have it. And so not everybody's going to want to sit down and write a book, but they could do a video. Come do an hour video, 2 hour video, and give us your. And actually, years ago, I saw this thing. I forget what it was called. It was online. It was expensive though. You could go to this place and pay a lot of money, and they would let you tell your story, and they would put the pictures in and stuff, and they would give it to your family like a legacy. And I'm like, well, not a lot of people are going to hear about it. Not a lot of people are going to afford it. And not a lot of people are going to travel and go do this with all, talent, bearing their soul. But now that we have Zoom, so what we're starting to do is we're starting with a nursing home, and the director's going to come on first. It'll be my first show, and she's going to tell her life story and how she got into do work and what she's doing. And then they're going to have a resident set up for me that has volunteered, want to share their story. So we're going to start there, and then once I have a few, then I can take this to other nursing homes, and so they can see what it looks like and see if anybody wants to participate. And, they'll need somebody at the nursing home to set them up and have them ready and with the camera and everything. And then, so it's available for their family, and also too, to have it online. And so it'll be there. They can download it on a disk or whatever on their computer. And, and also too, I thought it because when 2019, my mother-in-law was passing away. She got sent home on hospice, and I realized it was going to go quick. So I went and got a notebook, and I said, tell me your first memory. Just tell me your life story and I'll write it down. So she did. And it wasn't real long, a few pages. And so I typed it up and I made it her eulogy. And the place was packed because she was a popular woman. And people's mouths just opened, like they said it was like her talking. Because I dictated like how she said it and everything. And I thought, wow, I wish I could do this for other people. But where are you going to find people that's on their deathbed that wants to tell me their story? So we'll try it. We'll see what happens.
Well, good luck with that, Peggy.
So I didn't mean to make it a pitch on your interview. Um, so that's the way it's going to go. My ratings will probably go crap. I don't care, but I want to do this for people.
Yeah,
So
yeah, good. That's a nice contribution.
I appreciate you coming on, and maybe people's eyes be opened up to some of this stuff, and we'll see where it goes.
Okay,
All right,
very
thank
good.
you.
Thanks, Peggy.
Bye.
Okay, bye.